New York City was never short of luxury, neon lights painting the night, supercars roaring down Fifth Avenue, and penthouses scraping the clouds. Among the chaos of wealth and ambition lived a 25-year-old man named Aiden Carter, the only son of a real estate mogul who owned half of Manhattan's skyline. To the world, Aiden had it all: a garage filled with a Ferrari 812 Superfast, a McLaren Speedtail, and his newest obsession, a Bugatti La Voiture Noire. He wore Tom Ford suits, drank $2,000 champagne, and vacationed in the Maldives like it was a weekend errand. But deep inside, he was lonely. He wasn't arrogant. He wasn't entitled. He just didn't know what true love felt like. Every girl he met wanted his last name, his money, or his father's connections. None wanted him, the boy who once played racing games all night, who still painted alone when no one was watching. Then came Elena Rivera, a 23-year-old art student from Spain, who walked into his father's gallery exhibition one stormy night. She wasn't dressed to impress. Worn jeans. A plain black turtleneck. No jewelry. No makeup. Just her hair tied loosely, eyes wandering around the room like she was chasing ghosts on canvas. Aiden was used to being noticed, whispered about, even photographed without his consent. But she didn't even glance his way. It intrigued him. He followed her silently, observing from a distance as she stood still in front of a massive abstract painting. Colors collided violently on the canvas: reds, blacks, shattered strokes. "You see rage," she whispered to herself, unaware he was just behind. "But I see heartbreak." Aiden stepped closer. "Why heartbreak?" She turned, finally locking eyes with him. There was a softness in her expression, but a wall in her soul. Because love always leaves scars, not blood. That line hit him like a punch. They talked that night. And again 2 nights later. Then again. And again. Before he knew it, Aiden was canceling business meetings just to watch her paint in the studio she barely afforded. He brought her coffee every morning. He stopped bringing his cars. He didn't want her to see him as the billionaire's son. He wanted to be seen as just Aiden. Elena never asked about his wealth. She never Googled his last name. She never posted a single photo of him. To her, he was the guy who made bad jokes, painted in silence, and listened to her stories about her childhood in Seville. And Aiden? He was falling fast. One night, on the rooftop of his hidden studio in Brooklyn, he finally asked her the question that had been burning in his chest. "Why me, Elena? You could have anyone." She smiled, eyes glimmering under the moonlight. "Because you see me, not just my face." They kissed. And for the first time in years, Aiden felt something real. Something no Bugatti or Rolex could ever offer. But happiness, like most rare things, was fragile. One morning, Aiden woke up to a message. "Meet me at the old pier. Alone. Elena." Pier was abandoned, fog dancing over the water like spirits lost in time. He waited. 5 minutes. 10. 20. Then he saw her, wearing the same black turtleneck, eyes red from crying. "I have to leave," she said. "What? Why?" She looked away. "There are things you don't know about me. Things that could destroy you." Aiden reached for her hand. "I don't care. Just tell me." But she pulled away. "I'm sorry. I can't. This world of yours, it's too clean. Too bright. And I don't belong. Elena, please." Without another word, she walked away, into the mist, into the unknown, leaving nothing but silence behind. Back in his penthouse, Aiden stared at the blank canvas in his studio. For the first time in his life, he couldn't paint. His world was colorless. And no supercar, no luxury, no deal his father offered could bring her back. But Aiden wasn't the kind to give up. He made a vow that night. "Whatever secret she's hiding, I'll find it. And I'll bring her back." He just didn't know then that the secret would break him first. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into a haunting silence Aiden couldn't shake. Elena was gone, not just from his life, but from the city itself. He tried everything, called every number she once used, went to every art gallery she'd ever mentioned, even spoke to mutual friends who barely knew her. No one had answers. It was as if she'd vanished into thin air. But Aiden wasn't just another broken-hearted man. He was a Carter, raised on ambition, sharpened by obsession. and he wasn't going to rest until he uncovered the truth. So he hired someone. Not the typical private investigator. Aiden went straight to Liam Grayson, a former CIA asset now working in elite-level security consulting. If anyone could find a ghost, it was Liam. Within 3 days, Liam returned with a file. Slim but heavy with meaning. Her real name isn't Elena Rivera, Liam said flatly. She's Isabella Marquez, born in Barcelona. The parents involved in heavy debt. Her father disappeared. Her mother committed suicide when she was 16. Aiden's throat tightened. He couldn't believe what he was hearing. She was taken in by a distant uncle, Marco Alvarez, who's not just a businessman. He runs one of Europe's most discreet underground art laundering circles. Isabella was used as a front, the innocent face that could transport forged art across borders without suspicion. Aiden's hands trembled. The girl he fell in love with was a pawn in something darker. But she got out, he asked. Liam nodded. Apparently, 2 years ago, she testified in exchange for protection. But someone must have threatened her again. That's likely why she disappeared. Suddenly, everything made sense. The way she avoided cameras. How she never shared too much about herself. The fear in her eyes that final day. She was protecting him. That night, Aiden sat alone in his Brooklyn studio, surrounded by untouched canvases and silent luxury. The city buzzed outside, but inside it felt like a graveyard. She didn't leave me, he whispered. She saved me. Aiden knew what he had to do. If Elena, no Isabella, was running from danger, then he'd step into the fire himself. 2 weeks later, Aiden flew to Lisbon, Portugal, where Liam traced her last signal. The luxury car enthusiast ditched his private jet and Armani suits. Instead, he blended in hoodie, jeans, rental car. No one would suspect the billionaire's son was now chasing love across borders. Lisbon was a city of shadows and sun, narrow alleys, fado music echoing through old buildings, and whispers carried by the Atlantic wind. He found her near the old harbor, working in a tiny cafe under a false name. Her hair was shorter. She looked thinner. And when she turned and saw him, her eyes widened in disbelief, then fear. Aiden, no. What are you doing here? I came for you, he said, walking closer. You didn't leave because you wanted to. You left because you had to. I know everything, Isabella. Tears welled up in her eyes. You're not safe here. He smiled softly. I was never safe without you. She broke. In the middle of a quiet street in Lisbon, she fell into his arms, sobbing into his chest. It wasn't romantic. It was desperate, raw, and real. They sat by the harbor for hours. She told him everything, how Marco used her to smuggle forged paintings, how she finally escaped with the help of an Italian judge, how threats followed her even after she testified. I kept thinking, if they find me again and you're near, they'll hurt you too, she whispered. I don't care, Aiden said. Let them come. I'm not walking away. But she wasn't convinced. Aiden, these men don't care who you are. Even your father's money can't protect us from this. Aiden leaned in. Then let them fear me. By morning, Aiden had made his decision. He used his influence, not in the boardroom but in the shadows. He called in favors from powerful people who owed him. And most importantly, he pulled strings to get Marco Alvarez's name on Interpol's radar again. This wasn't just about love anymore. It was about justice. And revenge. Back in New York 2 weeks later, Isabella stood in Aiden's apartment, finally safe. The city skyline twinkled behind her, but she still looked haunted. Do you trust me now? He asked gently. She turned to face him, tears threatening again. More than anyone. He stepped closer. Then stay. She hesitated. With you. With me. In this life. In this madness. Forever. She nodded slowly. And for a moment it felt like the pain had a purpose. Like their love had truly survived time, distance, and even the past. But the story wasn't over yet. Because in a marble hallway in Spain, Marco Alvarez had just found out who was behind the Interpol leak. He stared at the photo in his hands. Aiden Carter. He smiled coldly. If he wants to play this game, let's see how far he's willing to go. Aiden Carter was no stranger to war, Only his battles were always fought with billion-dollar contracts, behind the safety of boardroom walls and glass offices. But this was different. Now, he wasn't protecting a legacy. He was protecting her. Isabella tried to act normal, tried to settle back into life in New York. But the shadows in her eyes never left. She painted again, slept beside him, smiled when he made breakfast, but there was always something behind the smile. Fear. Every time a car slowed down near their building, she tensed. Every time a stranger entered the cafe downstairs, she flinched. One night, as the city slept under velvet skies, Aiden caught her standing by the balcony, barefoot, arms wrapped around herself. He stepped behind her. What's wrong? She didn't turn. They won't stop. Marco won't stop. He's halfway across the world, Aiden said softly. And he's being hunted. But he knows who you are now, she whispered. He'll hurt you to hurt me. Aiden placed his hands gently on her shoulders. Then let him try. I'm done hiding. The very next day, Aiden received a parcel. No return address. Inside was a burned photo of him and Isabella, taken without their knowledge at the Lisbon harbor. Alongside it, a single note. Your empire is your weakness. Let's see what it takes to break it. Aiden stared at the photo, his jaw clenched. Marco wasn't going after them directly. He was going after the Carter Empire. That week, Aiden's company faced 3 mysterious cyber attacks. Then, one of their international banks in Dubai froze assets over fraud suspicion. Rumors spread. Investors grew nervous. Stock prices slipped by 7% overnight. Aiden knew this wasn't coincidence. It was a message. His father, Richard Carter, called from Paris. What the hell is happening? Is this about that girl? She's not just some girl, Dad. Richard sighed. I don't care who she is. We're losing control of the market. This is Carter Holdings, not some playground romance. Handle it or I will. Click. Aiden stood still, phone in hand. This wasn't just personal anymore. He was losing everything, his name, his family's legacy, his future. And still, he didn't regret it. Later that night, Isabella found him in the rooftop studio, staring at a blank canvas again. Everything's falling apart, he said quietly. She stepped closer. Because of me. He shook his head. Because I love you. And that's not a mistake. Tears filled her eyes. Maybe I shouldn't have come back. Aiden looked at her fiercely. If I lose everything but still have you, I've lost nothing. That was the moment she broke down completely. She dropped to her knees, sobbing into his chest. Aiden held her tightly, like he could protect her from the entire world. But in the shadows of Europe, Marco Alvarez wasn't done. He sent a man to New York, not to kill Aiden but to humiliate him. To send a message that even the mighty Carter name could bleed. Aiden was attending a high-profile charity gala at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Surrounded by billionaires, politicians, media, and cameras, the perfect place for a public spectacle. Dressed in a sharp black tuxedo, Aiden arrived with Isabella on his arm. She wore a silk champagne gown, her hair in a loose bun, her eyes still scanning the room for threats. They looked like the perfect power couple. Till chaos struck. In the middle of the ballroom, a man in a waiter's uniform stepped onto the platform where the auction was being held. Without warning, he shouted. Aiden Carter funds criminal organizations tied to European art smuggling. The room froze. Cameras turned. Security rushed forward, but the damage was done. Headlines exploded by midnight. Backhand index pointing right, billionaire tied to criminal art syndicate? Backhand index pointing right, Carter's love life linked to Spanish underworld. Backhand index pointing right, insider romance or international scam? By morning, Carter Holdings shares dropped another 12%. Major clients pulled deals. His father threatened to disown him publicly. And Isabella vanished again. She left behind one thing, a painting. It was unfinished, a stormy sea, a lone figure standing at the edge of a broken ship. In the corner, barely visible. I love you, but I won't let you drown because of me. Aiden sat in front of the painting for hours. No words. No tears. Just silence. Then he stood up and made a call. Liam. It's time. Time for what? Aiden's voice was ice. We end Marco. Completely. Aiden Carter had always played the game clean. Boardrooms, contracts, polite smiles, and calculated risks. But now the rules were off. This wasn't business. This was personal. And he was ready to become everything he never wanted to be, just to protect the woman who had already given up everything for him. Marco's in Madrid, Liam confirmed over encrypted phone. He's tightened his circle. Same estate. Same private guards. But now he's paranoid. Good, Aiden said coldly. That means he's scared. They created a plan, not just to bring Marco down, but to publicly ruin him. Aiden poured millions into hiring former intelligence operatives, elite hackers, and high-level informants in Interpol and Europol. He had names, locations, and the forged art trails Marco left behind. Every piece of evidence was backed, time-stamped, and stored across multiple servers. Then came the final strike. Aiden flew to Madrid under a fake identity. No press. No entourage. Just Liam and 2 ex-Navy SEALs who owed him favors from a Black Ops investment fund he once bailed out. They didn't go in guns blazing. They went in with silence. In a quiet neighborhood just outside the city, Marco's estate stood behind high walls and iron gates. Luxury cars lined the driveway, Bentleys, Range Rovers, a custom-painted Aston Martin Valkyrie. Aiden stared at it from the security cam feed. So much money, all from pain. 2:38 a.m., the team broke in. There was no gunfire. No drama. Just calculated moves, drugged guards, and one panicked man in a robe dragged into his own study. Marco Alvarez. He looked older now. Weaker. But his voice still carried arrogance. You dare step into my house? Aiden didn't blink. You dared touch my life. Marco chuckled bitterly. She's just a girl, Carter. You'll forget her eventually. They always do. Aiden stepped closer, eyes burning. You tried to destroy her. You humiliated her. You made her believe she wasn't worthy of love. And then you came for me. He dropped a black leather folder on the table. Marco opened it. What he saw made his face pale. Inside were bank records linking Marco to offshore laundering schemes. Photographs of forged paintings being shipped with his signature. Videos of him threatening young artists. Legal affidavits from ex-partners ready to testify. This is impossible, Marco whispered. Where did you get all this? From your shadows, Aiden replied. You built an empire from the fear of others. I built mine from loyalty. That's the difference. Marco tried to reach for a drawer, probably for a weapon. But Liam kicked it shut. You're done, Aiden said coldly. Interpol raids your estate at 6 a.m. sharp. Your funds are already frozen. Your name already blacklisted. You'll spend the rest of your life behind bars. Marco stared at him, broken. You don't have the guts to finish me. Aiden stepped forward. I don't need to kill you. Watching you lose everything is far worse. He leaned in. But just know this, the girl you once used as a pawn? She's the only reason I spared your life. Then he turned and walked out, leaving Marco in the silence of his crumbling kingdom. Back in New York, the headlines changed overnight. Backhand index pointing right, Interpol arrests Spanish tycoon in massive art fraud scandal. Backhand index pointing right, Marco Alvarez faces 30 years in prison, billionaire's evidence key to raid. Backhand index pointing right, Aiden Carter clears his name, Carter Holdings stock soar. But none of that mattered to Aiden. The media could spin stories. Investors could cheer. But the only thing he wanted was still gone. Until the night he found her. It was raining. A soft, endless drizzle. Aiden was walking through the old art district when he saw her, standing under a rusted awning, painting on a wooden easel despite the rain. She looked up. He froze. Isabella. She dropped her brush. And ran to him. There were no words. No apologies. Just arms wrapped tight, breaths shaky, lips crashing like waves that had waited lifetimes. You found me, she whispered. I never stopped, he replied. I thought, after everything. Aiden cupped her face, soaked in rain and tears. Marco's gone. You're free now. And so am I. They walked for hours that night, no umbrellas, no destination. Just two souls finally safe in each other's gravity. When they returned to his penthouse, he lit a single candle and led her to the studio. She saw it immediately. On the easel stood a canvas, half-finished, a stormy sea, a broken ship, and now a hand reaching out from the waves. Her hand. She smiled through tears. "You finished it." Aiden pulled her close. "No. We did." But just as they were about to begin their new chapter, a knock came at the door. "Liam." "Urgent." He handed Aiden a document, a letter from the Spanish courts. "What is it?" Isabella asked, voice shaking. Aiden opened it. His expression changed. She stepped back. "Aiden, what is it?" He looked up, heart sinking. "Marco made a deal, and he named you as an accomplice in exchange for a lighter sentence." The silence in the room felt heavier than gravity. Isabella stood frozen, the candlelight flickering across her face as Aiden read the court document over and over, refusing to believe what it said. Named as an accomplice. Subject to extradition. Pending trial in Spain. Her voice cracked. "He's lying, Aiden." "I know," he said immediately. "I know you'd never." "But they won't believe me," she whispered. "The justice system is about evidence. And Marco, he always kept enough strings to pull one last trick." Liam stepped forward. "Interpol can't protect her anymore. Not if she's formally charged. If the extradition order goes through, she'll be arrested within 48 hours. Aiden's hands clenched into fists. "No. I won't let them take her." "There's only one option," Liam said quietly. "She disappears. Again. New identity. New country. Gone for good." Isabella turned to Aiden, pain in her eyes. "We just found each other. And now I have to vanish all over again?" He didn't answer. His heart was at war, love screaming in one ear, logic in the other. He could save her, but only by losing her again. "Give me a moment with her," Aiden said to Liam, voice low. As the door shut behind them, he walked over to her and took her hands in his. "We could run," he whispered. "I have places no one knows. I could change your name, give you a life no one could touch." She smiled sadly. "You already gave me more than that. You gave me you." They held each other for what felt like the last time. The room spun with memories, stolen kisses in Lisbon, the night on the Brooklyn rooftop, her painting in the rain. She stepped back. "If I go, they'll stop chasing you. I don't care about me. But I care about you." By sunrise, she was gone. No note. No message. Just a single envelope left on the studio floor. Inside was her necklace, the one she never took off, and a new painting. It was of him. Alone, standing on a pier, staring at a fading shadow across the ocean. Weeks passed. Aiden threw himself into work again. Carter Holdings bounced back. His name was cleared publicly. Marco's deal was short-lived. Interpol found inconsistencies in his testimony, and he was given the maximum sentence. But none of it mattered. 'Cause Isabella was still missing from his world. And for the first time in his life, Aiden Carter, billionaire, strategist, fighter, had no plan. No fix. No power. Just longing. Then, on the first day of spring, something changed. He received a package. It was addressed to the man who waited. Inside was a folded canvas. A painting. A wide field under sunset skies. Two figures walking hand in hand, one barefoot, one in a tailored suit. And a note. "I'm safe. I'll come back when the world allows me to be yours again. Yours always. I." 6 months later. Tuscany, Italy. Aiden arrived alone, carrying nothing but the painting in his hand. He had no security, no assistance, no luggage. Just hope. A small art gallery in the heart of Siena had announced a mysterious showcase, The Woman Who Painted Through Silence. Every piece in the exhibit was hers. He walked through the doors slowly, each canvas like a heartbeat. There were paintings of cities they'd touched, of nights under stars, of pain, longing, and healing. And at the end of the hallway, one final canvas. Aiden froze. It was a painting of him, standing in front of a woman whose face was blurred, but whose body language spoke love, sorrow, and peace. And beside the painting, standing quietly, was Isabella. Her hair was longer again. Her eyes still held storms. But her smile was real. He stepped forward. She stepped into him. No words. Just forgiveness. Just return. Just love. They didn't need explanations. Time had done its damage. But distance had failed to destroy them. They stayed in Tuscany that summer. He bought a vineyard. She opened a small studio. They painted, cooked, laughed, and watched the world spin without them. One evening, as golden light flooded their terrace, Aiden dropped to one knee, not with a diamond from Cartier, but with a ring made of two intertwined olive branches. "Marry me," he said. "Not because the world is watching, not because we survived, but because I can't imagine a single sunrise without you." She knelt with him, tears in her eyes, and kissed him. Vlog. 1 year later, Aiden Carter no longer ruled boardrooms. He didn't care about the market or press or headlines. But once a year, on the anniversary of Marco's downfall, he sent a silent donation to a global artist rescue fund, helping creatives trapped in dangerous worlds escape like Isabella once had. Their story was never published, never turned into a documentary. It remained a painting only they could see, on the wall of their quiet home in Tuscany. But those who knew them whispered legends of a love that withstood betrayal, danger, exile, and still survived. The love that survived time and distance.